Government motion. Government business, motions. Government motion number 3 of 2018-2019, the strategic policy statement for the 2020 to 2022 financial year, to be moved by the Honorable Premier, Minister of Finance, Minister of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs.
The Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move government motion number 3 of the 2018-2019 session of the Legislative Assembly, entitled the Strategic Policy Statement for the 2020-2022 financial years. Whereas Section 23(1) of the Public Management and Finance Law 2018 revision states that the strategic policy statement for the next budget period shall be presented to the Legislative Assembly by a member of the Cabinet, appointed by the Cabinet to do so on behalf of the Cabinet no later than the 1st of May, immediately prior to each budget period, for approval within 2 months. And whereas the next budget period is with respect to the 2020 and 2021 financial years, and whereas the strategic policy statement tabled during this April 2019 meeting of the Legislative Assembly satisfies the legal requirement to encompass a 3-year time frame, and presently this time frame involves the 2020 to 2022 financial years. Be it now therefore resolved that the Legislative Assembly approves the policy priorities, aggregate financial targets, and financial allocations set out in the 2020 to 2022 strategic policy statement as the indicative parameters on which the 2020 and 2021 budgets will be formulated.
The question is, be it now therefore resolved that the Legislative Assembly approves the policy priorities, aggregate financial targets, and financial allocations set out in the 2020-2022 strategic policy statement as the indicative parameters on which the 2020 and 2021 budgets will be formulated. The motion is open for debate. The Honorable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Development earlier today laid on the table of this Honorable House and spoke to this government's 2020 to 2022 strategic policy statement. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will read from that statement the summary of economic and fiscal forecasts. The 2020 strategic policy statement provides medium-term economic and financial forecasts for the government for the next 3 financial years, covering the period 1st January 2020 to 31st December 2022, along with the government's broad strategic outcomes which will guide the development and implementation of government policy during this period. In addition, the strategic policy statement sets the parameters for the preparation of the detailed 2020 and 2021 budgets and provides the operating expenditure and capital investment targets to be achieved by each ministry, portfolio, and office over the next 3 financial years. Mr. Speaker, overall economic growth in the Cayman Islands is forecasted to increase at steady rates over the medium term. Economic growth, as measured by changes in the gross domestic product, is forecasted to grow by 2.8% in 2019, 2.2% in 2020, and 2.1% in 2021, and 2% in 2022. The Consumer Price Index, which measures the change in retail prices, is also expected to increase by 2.7% in 2019, followed by increases of 2.2% per year in 2020, 2021, and 2022. These forecasted changes are primarily driven by forecasts in the United States, the principal market from which the Cayman Islands imports its consumer products. Mr. Speaker, the government remains committed to a fiscal strategy that is centered on the following key principles: compliance with the principles of responsible financial management, in particular, achieving substantial surpluses each year, no new fees or taxes levied on the public, and no new borrowings. The 2020 SPS builds on this central guiding fiscal policy objective for the management of the government's finances over the forecast period. Growth in revenue is driven primarily by increased demand for goods and services, as all sectors in the local economy are projected to expand during the forecast period. The government also anticipates transferring a total of $74.3 million to general revenues from various trust accounts whose holding period is scheduled to mature during the SPS period. The total operating expenditure targets for the core government for each of the next 3 financial years have been set at $734.2 million for 2020, $741.7 million for 2021, and $746.8 million for 2022. This expenditure will be used over the next 3 years to fund the following key priorities: the Ministry of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs, improving safety and security through enhanced community policing, improving security of our borders, delivering better management of labor markets, implementation of the immediate priorities in the older persons policy, and social assistance program reform. In the new Ministry of International Trade, Investment, Aviation and Maritime Affairs, establishing a new ministry to foster international relations and promote foreign investment in these islands. In the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport, enhancing tourism marketing to high-value source markets, continuing service by Cayman Airways to strategic tourism markets, and the continued implementation of the National Tourism Plan. The Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, increasing funding to the Cayman Islands National Insurance Company for the continued provision of health insurance services to its clients. In the Ministry of Financial Services and Home Affairs, enhancing the financial services policy functions of the ministry and the regulatory services provided by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority in response to recent international regulatory changes, and building capacity in the Cayman Islands Fire Services and the Prison Service. In the Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure, continuing to develop and implement information technology services, including improved cybersecurity and e-government initiatives, and the continuation of the Georgetown Revitalization Project. In the Ministry of Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture and Lands, continuing enhancement of teaching and learning in schools with a focus on increasing the use of online and computerized testing, strengthening core curriculum across primary and secondary schools, funding for scholarships for advanced, specialized tertiary education, such as medical and special education needs, and supporting and promoting growth in the agriculture sector. In the Ministry of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing, implementing the new integrated solid waste management system and the commencement of operations of the new long-term residential mental health facility. The total capital expenditure target for the core government over the next 3 financial years has been set at $383.4 million to address critical investment in areas such as education, facilities, road infrastructure, solid waste management, improvements to public safety facilities, and continued support of statutory authorities and government-owned companies. The government is forecasted to maintain year-end cash balances averaging $282.2 million over the SPS period, and full compliance with the principles of responsible financial management. The government does not intend to incur any new borrowings and plans to fund all of its operating expenditure and capital investments from cash generated from its operations. I confess, Mr. Speaker, that as I rose today, I find myself somewhat reflective, for this will be the last time that I am called upon as the Premier of these islands to move the motion for adoption of the government's strategic policy statement. It is also recognition that I have just 2 years left to get as much done for my country in this role as I am able to do. So these next 2 years will not be a gentle wind down, but rather a ramping up of delivery as my government looks to push on further and achieve even more for our people. Yet inevitably, this last strategic policy statement does lead me to reflect on how different, indeed how much better, a place our islands are in now compared to when I rose to make my first speech 6 years ago, following the 2013 elections. Following those elections, as we formed the government, we understood full well what Winston Churchill meant when he said, and I quote, "The problems of victory are more agreeable than those of defeat, but they are no less difficult," unquote. Everyone here will remember that at that time, Cayman was struggling to pull itself out of the last major recession. And so we knew that whoever won that 2013 elections would face real challenges. Certainly the recession had taken its toll on our economy and the jobs market. Growth had virtually stagnated, and the overall GDP of the Cayman Islands was still lower than it had been before the impact of the recession. Caymanian unemployment had continued to rise, reaching a high of 10.5% in 2012. Consequently, government finances were hit hard, as revenues fell just at the time when the need for counter-cyclical government spending was increasing. Inevitably, government deficits followed, and public sector debt ran to a peak of over $613 million. Against that background, Mr. Speaker, when I gave my very first policy address to this House on 7th of October 2013, I set out both what I believed the task of the government was and the approach we would adopt. I said then, Mr. Speaker, and I'm quoting, "In May this year, the people of this country entrusted the progressives to form a government to get this country back on course. As leader, I have striven from the very outset to honor that trust by forming as inclusive a government as possible," unquote. In the last 6 years, we have indeed put the country back on course. And across 2 successive administrations, I have kept true to that inclusive approach. As a result, what a very different position our country finds itself in. The economy has grown steadily. The latest figures from the Economics and Statistics Office show annualized GDP growth at 3.6% in the 3rd quarter of last year. Caymanian unemployment has plummeted. When the fall 2018 labor force survey is completed and released, it will show that Caymanian unemployment has better than halved to 4.6% from that peak of 10.5% before we took office. This is the lowest level of Caymanian unemployment in more than a decade, a tremendous achievement by any standard. But this is not a singular achievement. There is more. Government continues to generate significant surpluses. My 2 administrations have generated a total operating surplus of some $700 million, and we have managed to reduce government debt to under $420 million, having repaid over $150 million since 2013. And we will substantially reduce this further before the end of this term. Mr. Speaker, all this has not just happened by accident. It is the product of this government's willingness to support and work with the private sector to achieve sustainable growth. It is the product of this government's determination to see that Caymanians are able to benefit from that growth through accessing jobs and opportunities. And, Mr. Speaker, it is the product of this government's sensible and prudent stewardship of the nation's finances, including rebuilding surpluses and repaying debt. However, I believe that as that, as eye-catching as those headlines are, it is behind the numbers that the real achievements of this government lie. Economic growth and sound government finances count for little if we cannot harness those things to make a difference in our country and to improve the lives of Caymanians. The test is whether this government is delivering on the promises we made to our people. And against that yardstick, we have a proven and growing track record of success. Taken together, what we have already achieved and what I am confident we can go on to put in place over the next 2 years will represent a record that everyone on these benches can be proud to put before the people who voted us into office. I've repeatedly made the point in this House and beyond, Mr. Speaker, that success in driving economic growth is a precondition for everything else that an elected government wishes to do. Support for our two-pillar industries, financial services and tourism, has therefore underpinned the government's economic strategy. In both respects, we have been successful. In financial services, despite the upheavals of the last recession and more recently the seemingly endless compliance initiatives and the endless assaults from those working to undermine our jurisdiction, the Cayman Islands remains the international financial services center of choice across a range of key markets. This is the direct result of Cayman's approach in balancing its open for business attitude with fair and proportionate regulation, coupled with world-class legal, accounting, and asset management professionals. This government has continued to develop our legislative and regulatory frameworks to meet global standards, most recently with the passing in this House before Christmas of the economic substance legislation. We have also been willing to go the extra mile, or thousands of extra miles actually, to take the political arguments to the European Union and elsewhere in support of a financial services industry. I must acknowledge the work of the Minister for Financial Services and the team in her ministry for the tremendous effort they have put in over the last 18 months in particular in making the case for Cayman. The fact that Cayman has yet again avoided any kind of blacklisting by the EU is in no small measure the direct result of the efforts that the Minister and I, supported by the Ministry staff and the Honourable Attorney General, have made in taking Cayman's case directly to the capitals of Europe. And I have to again acknowledge the tremendous contribution made by our private sector financial services partners who worked long hours to help us fine-tune the legislation on economic substance. We have more to do, Mr. Speaker, as the goalposts continue to move, but this is no surprise. The EU has now added a requirement that Cayman should address an apparent need to give appropriate economic substance to collective investment vehicles, or more simply put, funds. I say apparent need because the EU has yet to make it clear why the thousands of funds based in Cayman should be required to be given economic substance when that is not a requirement for funds anywhere else in the world. Nor indeed have they been able to articulate quite what that requirement actually means, nor how it might be achieved. Nonetheless, we will continue to engage with the EU and work with the industry here to devise a way forward, so long as that is practical and is an accepted global standard. As well as the EU, we have the Financial Action Task Force report released last month to deal with. We have fallen short of changing requirements, as for the first time, the inspection considered not just the legislative regime in place, but the effectiveness of its implementation. There are those, Mr. Speaker, who would say that it is because of our significance as a financial services center that the bar is higher for us. However, even if there is truth in this, I believe that the report's recommendations will help to strengthen our jurisdiction. I've said before that Cayman does not need or want illegitimate business. and we stand ready to do all that we can to resist any attempts at using our financial services industry for money laundering, terrorist financing, or other illegal purposes. With much work still to do, Mr. Speaker, the government's SPS and budgetary planning and our legislative timetable both reflect our determination to support our financial services industry and to defend our position. Our tourism industry also continues to thrive. Last year, Cayman welcomed nearly 2.4 million visitors, the highest number in our history. The number of stayover visitors broke previous records, and cruise visitor numbers would have also seen a record year, but for bad weather in December that prevented 12 ships from stopping here. This success is the result of a lot of hard work. The Minister for Tourism and his team have a marketing approach that is the envy of the region, and the House will no doubt want to join me in recognizing the success they bring to Cayman. Perhaps one of the most tangible expressions of the government's support for the industry is the new airport terminal. For years, Mr. Speaker, the airport had been creaking at the seams. This government has finally delivered the modernization for which our country was crying out. No sooner has the Prince of Wales opened the new airport terminal than we are turning our attention to the next phase of the airport master plan, runway, and other improvements that enhance efficiency and safety. And so we continue to support the development of our tourism product, whether through private sector projects, new air routes, or government-sponsored infrastructure. Hotel projects in the pipeline and the new air links, such as the Denver route recently opened by Cayman Airways, will continue to expand our stayover visitor business. And I must add that I appreciate the efforts of Cayman Airways in maintaining this important new route, despite the unexpected and immense challenges posed by the grounding of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft. The new cruise and enhanced cargo port, when built, and it will be built, Mr. Speaker, will secure our vital cruise industry for decades and create jobs and business opportunities for Caymanians. It will also enable the country to develop needed cargo handling capacity that means we can import the goods we need to serve an increasing population, potentially at lower prices. All of these major initiatives are important to our success, and this government will see them through. The results of all this, Mr. Speaker, must be tangible benefits for Caymanians. To illustrate how our approach delivers those benefits, I will highlight the development at 7 Mile Public Beach that is happening as a result of the agreement between DART, the NRA, and government, and will see $3 million spent on improvements to the sport facilities, landscaping, and washrooms. Caymanian vendors and other commercial activities will be facilitated at a dedicated vendor village with better management arrangements. When complete, vendors will have a dedicated area and beachgoers will be able to better enjoy the public beach. Our focus extends well beyond the 7 Mile Beach corridor. This government is directly investing in an improved area for local artisans and other beach vendors at Cowood Beach in Bordentown. This development can help to stimulate private sector investment in Bordentown and is an important part of our plans to help encourage more visitors to look eastward. Similarly, the government's recently announced plans to invest $1 million in a long-term solution to the problem of beach erosion at Caibo will reestablish that area as a favorite recreational area. The new South Sound Boardwalk is winning considerable praise from its growing number of users. It also serves a broader purpose to safeguard one of the best natural views on Grand Cayman. So, Mr. Speaker, opportunities for the greater enjoyment of our beaches for local people, better commercial opportunities for local businesses, these are the tangible benefits we are delivering. When we look at the 2 years that this strategic policy statement covers, most commentators and economic forecasters believe there will be a global slowdown. We cannot think that Cayman can remain unaffected by what happens in the global economy. And let us be honest, a slowdown at some point is inevitable. However, our economy is robust and resilient, and local businesses and government are in a good position to meet the challenges ahead. Diversification of Cayman's economy must be a central part of our future economic strategy in order to spread risks, improve resilience, and create new opportunities for Caymanians. Again, the government has acted in this respect. One excellent example is the impact that the world-class intellectual property legislation put in place by my last administration is having. That legislation was critical for not only attracting new industries, but also breathing new life into existing business lines. Because of this modern IP legislation, we have seen the founding of Tech Cayman, which is already beginning to attract digital and knowledge-based businesses to our shores. The legislation has also supported the work done by Cayman Enterprise City and is helping that special economic zone attract new business to the Cayman Islands. The importance of the IP legislative framework is also being seen in its impact more broadly. Trademark registrations have more than doubled from an annual average of around 300 to over 600 in the 12 months following the passing of the legislation. For the first time in its 30-year history, the North American Law Summit was held in Cayman last year, attracted here to discuss the new opportunities that our IP regime offers business sectors like the entertainment industry. This demonstrates the very strong potential for future growth for Cayman in the knowledge industries. And speaking of strong potential, Mr. Speaker, I am also pleased to note the growth in the number of reinsurance companies and the increased interest from players in this key sector in setting up in Cayman. The reinsurance sector is one that we intend to support and grow. It is the development of these new industries, alongside our support for the traditional pillars of our economy, that will create the jobs and business opportunities for future generations of Caymanians. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, there is still a perception, spread by some, that Cayman's economic success is being delivered on the backs of the Caymanian people rather than for their benefit. Mr. Speaker, nothing could be further from the truth. It is fashionable in some political circles these days to disparage facts in favor of half-truths, misleading statements, and even downright lies. I hope, though, Mr. Speaker, that in this House, the facts still matter, and that truth is something we all still respect. So let us examine the facts, Mr. Speaker. This government pledged to work to achieve full Caymanian employment so that every Caymanian willing and able to work is able to find a job. The facts tell us that we are well on our way to delivering on that pledge. As I stated earlier, Caymanian unemployment has better than halved from its peak and now stands at 4.6%, and we will continue to work to create more opportunities. Behind that headline statistic, Mr. Speaker, lies increased prosperity for a huge number of Caymanians and their families. Overall, some 3,300 more Caymanians are employed now than prior to my government taking office in 2013. For those who persist in doubting whether this government's economic strategy is really benefiting Caymanians, I will just repeat that, Mr. Speaker. 3,300 more Caymanians are in work now than when my government took office in 2013. Our pledge to create a new integrated department dealing with both labor and immigration issues has been delivered with the formal launch in February of Workforce Opportunities in Residency Cayman, or WORK. Pardon me, Mr. Speaker. I'm having a bit of a problem here. I accept that changing the machinery of government is not, in and of itself, something to trumpet. So let us look at what the new department will deliver in the coming months. The first of those will be the online jobs clearinghouse, due to go live in the next few weeks, through which all jobs will be advertised, allowing every Caymanian full access to the opportunities available. In the longer term, for the first time, we are creating the capacity and capability in government to work with the private sector to identify the future needs of business so that we can make sure Caymanians have the skills needed to access the jobs that will be created. Improvements in the work permit regime are also progressing, and we will road test the proposed changes shortly. For those that need more help in the labor market, here and now, the government has acted to make the National Community Enhancement Project happen twice a year. Around 500 Caymanians benefited from 3 weeks' work experience and the income it brought them in the last program in the run-up to Christmas. It is worth noting again, Mr. Speaker, that the number of participants in the last program was well below that of previous occasions, thanks to the significant reductions we have achieved in unemployment for Caymanians. I have heard it argued, Mr. Speaker, that these excellent job numbers are a red herring. The argument goes that Caymanians are being stuck in low-wage jobs, while opportunities for advancement are only available to expat workers. As is often the case, Mr. Speaker, a very small grain of truth is being spun into a web of misinformation. Again, let us examine the facts. The Occupational Wage Survey, recently released by the Economics and Statistics Office, for the first time gives us real data to draw upon. While the results are not strictly representative, having gotten returns in respect of only around half of all those in employment, I think we can safely draw some key conclusions. First, let us consider that the average Caymanian wage earner in the survey earned $3,851 per month, or over $46,200 a year. I believe that we can agree that is a respectable wage, Mr. Speaker. However, what may be surprising to some is that the survey results also indicate that the average Caymanian wage earner makes more than $500 per month, or $6,000 per annum, than the average non-Caymanian wage earner in the survey. That is because when you look at the lowest 20% of earners in our economy, only 13% of Caymanians are in that bracket, but over 28% of non-Caymanians can be found there. Conversely, the proportions of high earners are broadly the same, with Caymanians being just as prevalent as non-Caymanians in the top 20% of earners. So, Mr. Speaker, overall then, the statistics in the survey indicate that Caymanians are generally better paid relative to expat workers, and certainly more Caymanians are doing well in our flourishing economy than this government's critics would have anyone believe. It is always a mistake, though, Mr. Speaker, to look at the overall picture and to ignore the very real problems of some individuals. That is where the grain of truth I mentioned earlier comes in. I expect everyone in this House knows of people in their constituencies who are low paid or who have been denied opportunity for advancement. That is why this government will not ignore those individuals. For those who are currently amongst the lowest paid in our economy, the government will review the minimum wage. Now that the Occupational Wage Survey, the key data source needed, has been published, the review can formally commence. I will commit now to this House that the government will carefully consider and act upon the outcome of the review. For those who feel that opportunities are being denied them, the new work department will put in place two important mechanisms in the coming months. The best approach is to work with businesses to get this right. Therefore, the first mechanism is an accreditation scheme that will recognize those businesses that actively provide opportunities for Caymanians. However, we also recognize that things still may go wrong, and we need to be able to clamp down where Caymanians are subject to unfair employment practices. The second mechanism is therefore the creation of a new Fair Employment Opportunities Commission. The House will debate the legislation required to create the commission at its next meeting. But for now, I will say that I believe it is a crucial piece in the overall approach this government is creating to secure the fair treatment of Caymanians. Its key purpose is to penalize unfair practices in a way that prompts businesses to eliminate discriminating practices. So to summarize the facts I've laid before the House, Mr. Speaker, our economy is growing strongly and government's approach will secure the long-term future we need. Caymanians are benefiting from that growth. We have delivered a significant reduction in unemployment, and overall, some 3,300 more Caymanians now have jobs when compared to 2013. Caymanians in work are generally better paid than non-Caymanians, and at the higher pay brackets, Caymanians and non-Caymanians are equally well represented. The government is tackling low pay through the minimum wage review, promoting opportunities for Caymanians through the accreditation scheme, and tackling discriminatory practices by establishing the Fair Employment Opportunities Commission. But, Mr. Speaker, low wages are one issue, but so are wages that have been fixed with little movement despite higher prices in the shops. We cannot fix this for everyone, but we can and have mostly fixed this in the civil service by addressing over the last term and this one the pay stagnation caused by the austerity measures following the 2008 recession. This included various cost of living increases so as to account for inflation, as well as dealing with salaries across the civil service that had fallen out of line with the market rates for similar jobs. Whilst these corrections addressed wages of the civil service, it also sent a clear signal to the private sector. This then, Mr. Speaker, is a track record of delivering for Caymanians that this government is proud to lay before the House and the country. Yet there is more. Some say that a rising tide raises all boats. However, I have never believed that we can rely solely on economic growth and what Adam Smith called the invisible hand of market forces to solve all of the issues we face. Sometimes government needs to act directly to benefit people who would otherwise be left behind. I would echo the sentiments of Rahul Gandhi, who remarked, quote, "A rising tide doesn't raise people who don't have a boat. We have to build the boat for them," unquote. For that reason, Mr. Speaker, this government made a pledge to the country to improve the position of seafarers, veterans, those in need of social assistance, and long-serving civil service pensioners. That is a pledge we have delivered on. As of this January, we have raised the guaranteed minimum income of those Caymanians to $750 per month from $550 per month when we took office. This represents an increase of at least 36% in the household income of over 2,000 Caymanians and their families. Hundreds more Caymanians are benefiting from the work that the Minister of Commerce is leading to improve the support available for small businesses. I thank the Minister for the welcome approach he is taking to enhance opportunities for enterprising and entrepreneurial Caymanians who want to start and grow their own business. Central to that approach is the drive to reduce the burdens government places on business, be they financial or regulatory. Trade and business law requirements have been greatly reduced, and the whole renewal process has been moved online. Take-up of that online service is improving as business owners' awareness of the benefit it brings to them increases. As part of this government's commitment not to raise costs on businesses and families, we have maintained the reduced fees for small businesses put in place by the last administration. In 2018, some 4,800 micro or small businesses benefited from these reduced fees. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I apologize, but I seem to be having one of my allergy attacks as I do this, this speech. I would also note, Mr. Speaker, that recent amendments to the Companies Law have also reduced red tape and costs for nonprofit organizations, including local charities, churches, sports and youth clubs, and associations. Application fees were cut from $1,000 to $300, and administrative fees from $500 to $25. The second part of our approach is about improving the support available to small and micro businesses. The Minister and the Cayman Islands Small Business Association signed a memorandum of understanding in February aimed at delivering a range of support services, including workshops, mentoring sessions, grants, and individual assistance to small businesses. The partnership between public and private sectors will be further enhanced through the establishment of a small business center that will enable the provision of direct support, which will increasingly be tailored to the specific needs of Cayman's thriving small business sector. As Cayman continues to grow, we need to do so in a planned and sustainable way that makes best use of the land available while preserving our unique environmental heritage. The government has delivered on its pledge to restart the long-term planning process through the publication of the Plan Cayman Development Framework that recently completed the first round of public consultation. I am pleased that so many individuals and organizations across Cayman have shown such interest in the process. We have received over 2,800 visits to the Plan Cayman website, and over 350 people have submitted formal responses. We will now take the process forward. The Minister has wisely decided to move into more detailed planning on an area-by-area basis. This means that we can focus on one major land area at a time. By covering the whole island over a 5-year period and then restarting at the beginning, it makes the process continuous and allows for an ongoing planning review process. Most crucially, the development of area plans will give an opportunity for people to be engaged in the future of their own communities. The first such plan will be created for the 7 Mile Beach corridor because we need to deal positively with both the significant development pressures there as well as ensuring that the country is maximizing the economic opportunities available. That process will proceed alongside the work we are doing on the revitalization of Georgetown. The House will no doubt be aware, Mr. Speaker, that we have both spoken in recent months about the potential to consider much higher buildings as part of both of these pieces of work. The DART organization's concept for an iconic tower at Camana Bay is something we must take seriously. I was pleased that my comments generated some debate in the press and elsewhere regarding increased building heights generally and tall towers specifically. Indeed, at the recently concluded conference of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors in Cayman, it was reported that this matter was discussed and the concept of an iconic tower was said to have merited consideration. I agree. It was also noted that given the potential size, the tower proposal should be separated from a wider debate about building heights in general. I also agree. However, I suspect there is a very long way to go before DART or any other developer builds any such tower. Although much focus will be on 7 Mile Beach, including increasing of building heights there, there is also real potential in rethinking the building heights we might be willing to see as part of the Georgetown revitalization. If we are to see the kind of mixed-use development that could both ease commercial demand pressures and bring our capital back to life as a social and cultural center, as well as an economic hub, we need to be willing to think more creatively about how we utilize space. As I recently said in my speech at the Cayman Economic Outlook Conference, the key issue for government considering any proposals to increase building heights, especially to accommodate any ultra-tall tower, will be the tangible benefits it brings to Caymanians. We will want to see job and training opportunities, and I've made it clear that any developer will also need to bring forward a significant program of infrastructure investment. This would necessarily include road and other transport improvements and potentially social infrastructure, improvements to Cayman schools, or investment in affordable housing for local people, for example. As well as taking an area-based approach, the government will pick up and tackle some of the important thematic issues contained in Plan Cayman. Perhaps the most vital and immediate of these is infrastructure. This government has recognized the historic backlog in infrastructure investment in Cayman, and we have invested tens of millions of dollars over the last 6 years to begin reducing that backlog. This has most obviously been seen in the improvements we have delivered in the country's road network. While the achievements of the last 6 years have been considerable, the growth in traffic has been such that our increasing capacity has barely kept pace with the ever-rising tide of demand. In some cases, problems are just getting worse. Members of this House will not need me to tell them this. I'm sure they hear it directly from their constituents, particularly those living east of Grand Harbor. And so we intend to fast forward existing plans to address the traffic congestion along the peak east-west routes. Mr. Speaker, this administration has come up with something that eludes many governments worldwide. Mr. Speaker, that is a common sense solution. We will push forward road improvement and spending originally planned for later years to deliver the improvements we need in the coming 2-year period. In particular, this means that plans for the extension of the East-West Arterial will be accelerated by more than 2 years, and we will take the route first through to northward and then on to Bordentown. The cost of this work is likely to be some $18 million, we are told, which, as I have said, we will bring forward from future years into the coming budget period. This is absolutely crucial in solving the problems, Mr. Speaker, but while it is necessary, it is not sufficient. Accordingly, we are also reprioritizing the rest of the highways program to include projects around Grand Harbor and westward into Georgetown to ensure traffic can move more smoothly. Taken together, this package of improvements will enable us to reduce congestion, shorten and make more reliable journey times, and improve accessibility between central Georgetown and communities to the east. So, Mr. Speaker, for those avid social media followers among you who would have seen the meme that went around, I can promise that we will be able to deliver this program of improvements without making another 364 roundabouts. Seriously though, these plans represent a significant additional investment in the highways program beginning near the end of this year and stretching over the next 2 years. Finding the money for all this, which the elected government has done in this SPS process, is only one aspect of the challenge. We rely on the capacity of the National Roads Authority in terms of the workforce and equipment needed to carry out works of the scale. And I would like to thank them for their positive approach, they have shown to mobilizing to deliver on the plans we are announcing today. The Plan Cayman project also gives us the opportunity to properly evaluate the long-term potential for different solutions to the problems our small island nation faces. I would like to highlight 2 issues in particular. The first is renewable energy. The creation of the National Energy Policy by the last administration set ambitious but achievable goals to move Cayman to a more sustainable pattern of energy generation and consumption. The government is implementing several important actions, such as the switch to greater use of electric vehicles and increased use of renewables for government buildings. The Plan Cayman process, however, gives us the opportunity to look at how we might implement some of the more ambitious parts of the National Energy Policy in a planned fashion, and we intend to take advantage of the opportunity. The second is the related issue of sustainable transport. Sorry about that, Mr. Speaker. The second is the related issue of sustainable transport. I've just announced the government's commitment to increasing substantially our investment in road building. That is vital if we are able to deal with today's problems. However, all the evidence suggests that if we simply increase road capacity, then sooner or later the roads will just become congested again as our population continues to grow. And I should add, Mr. Speaker, there is no indication whatsoever that our population growth is likely to stop or even slow. In anticipating tomorrow's problems, we must deliver alternative solutions. These include safer cycling and walking routes, but I also believe a radical new approach to public transport is necessary. Accordingly, alongside our announcement of increased highway investments, I'm also announcing today that the government will commission a specialist mass transportation study to analyze the options available to us to achieve the necessary step change in public transport that the country needs. Indeed, that the country must have. The study will be complete within a year so that we will be able to consult widely and drop detailed plans for inclusion in the next strategic policy statement. The sustainable future we need involves striking a balance between development and the needs of our environment. It does not help us that government has created approaches and legislation that, rather than reconciling those twin drivers, appear to have unnecessarily pitched them as enemies. Now that the Plan Cayman process is underway, it is time to progress the commitment the government made to review the operation of the National Conservation Law. Personally, I believe that large parts of that law are necessary and valuable, and we need to maintain them. Other parts are perhaps not so helpful. If I may add some levity, Mr. Speaker, if one dare do that in this House anymore, and paraphrase American President Ronald Reagan, if the conservation law had been around at the time the Creator was turning his hand to founding our three islands, we would still be waiting on an environmental impact assessment. But in all seriousness, Mr. Speaker, it is important not to cherry pick at this point. So the government will conduct a thorough review of the whole law and how well it works, and consult widely as part of that process. I expect we will bring forward proposed amendments to this House early next year. In the meantime, the government's delivery of its environmental objectives will continue. Perhaps the most significant will be concluding the contractual negotiations with the consortium that will implement the measures this country needs to end our unsustainable reliance on the landfill. I am optimistic that if we can push those negotiations to a speedy conclusion, if it could really be called speedy after more than 2 years, then during the next coming budget period, we will be able to put in place the enhanced recycling facilities we need, begin the preparatory works for the new waste-to-energy plant, and make substantial progress on the required remediation works at the landfill itself. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I am hopeful that work on remediation can begin this year. My optimism is boosted by the fact that despite the delays in finalizing the contract, we have already dealt with the tires at the site and increased the recycling of metals. In addition, I understand that negotiations are proceeding well and should be completed in the coming months. Effective management of the country's waste is not just about major infrastructure. It is also about something really basic: litter. Cayman has always been a relatively clean place in which to live, but in recent times the situation has deteriorated and litter has become increasingly more prevalent. We need to act now before littering of our streets, beaches, and open spaces gets completely out of control. I can therefore announce today that the government is preparing a major anti-litter campaign. We need to re-educate both locals and tourists as to what is expected from them. We need to provide better facilities for waste and, in time, for street recycling bins. And we need to look again at the litter laws and their enforcement. All three parts of this campaign are important and need to reinforce each other. Other environmental-related infrastructure is being progressed, notably the new reverse osmosis water plant and pipe water distribution system in Cayman Brac. Mr. Speaker, it is pleasing also to see the positive international attention that our approach to protecting natural species is now attracting. After years of adverse press reports, the achievements of the Cayman Turtle Center in restoring healthy populations of our national symbol are being recognized. Using data provided by years of DOE research, Department of the Environment research, a University of Barcelona study shows 90% of green sea turtles nesting in Grand Cayman have a genetic connection to the Cayman Turtle Center. The Department of Environment is now partnering with CUC and the NRA to install 40 turtle-friendly street lights along main roads adjacent to turtle nesting beaches in Grand Cayman. This pilot program aims to maintain road illumination and safety while reducing mortalities caused when hatchlings emerge from their nests and follow the bright street lights to the road. The Nassau grouper conservation efforts are also winning plaudits. More generally, the government has enhanced our approach to marine conservation to protect natural habitats and species and promote biodiversity. We stated long ago that as part of the inevitable need to mitigate any environmental damage caused by the port development, we will enhance environmental protections elsewhere. Accordingly, to coincide with the Prince of Wales' visit last month, the Minister of the Environment announced that Cabinet has approved the preparation of drafting instructions to strengthen and enhance our system of marine parks. Once implemented, the shelf area protected as marine parks will increase from 15% to 44% in Grand Cayman, from 14% to 43% in Cayman Brac, and from 10% to 57% in Little Cayman. These enhancements will significantly enhance the protection of the marine ecosystem in the Cayman Islands and safeguard the future of our precious marine environment. I would like to offer my thanks to the Councillor for the Environment for the support he has given to the Minister in assisting with this project. The long-standing Blue Iguana Recovery Program is growing from strength to strength, with upwards of 1,000 blues living freely in one or more protected areas. Also working well is a program to cull the invasive green iguana, which has already destroyed more than 500,000 of the harmful species, and to which we are committing further funding as needed. While it may not be possible to cull every last green iguana, the success of this project to date indicates we can get the number down to levels that we can effectively control in the future. The protection and safeguarding of land is equally important, Mr. Speaker. We have procured a further 634 acres of protected land, increasing the total amount of protected land here to 4,111 acres, about 6.3% of Cayman's total land mass. Sorry about that, Mr. Speaker. Open space that our people can enjoy is also an important part of community infrastructure. We are progressing the project to enhance Smith Barcadere, and we have purchased Scranton Central Park to safeguard public access. And land has also been procured to create a park for Red Bay and Prospect. Thanks to government's actions, thousands of Caymanians will be able to use and enjoy these important open spaces in perpetuity. I would like to thank the Councillor for the Lands Ministry for the work she has done, particularly at Smith Barcadere. The government is also implementing its plans to ensure beach access is being enhanced across all three islands. The beach access report was delivered a year ago and has ensured that we can correctly identify each of the 121 actual rights-of-way accesses and the 167 unregistered paths to the sea across our three islands. The public is now able to locate those routes more easily through a program of improved signage by the Public Lands Commission. Mr. Speaker, as we heard in this Honourable House earlier this week, since July 2018, government has purchased 16 parcels of land from the $10 million appropriated from the Environmental Protection Fund. There is an unspent $3.9 million of the $10 million appropriation, which will be carried over for the land purchase project to continue this year. The government is also delivering real improvements in those quality of life issues that are dear to the hearts not just of Caymanians, but to people the world over. Our natural desire for a roof over our heads, safety and security for our families, and good health. This government is supporting Caymanians in achieving their dream of home ownership. Accordingly, we have reinvigorated the National Housing Development Trust in its mission to construct suitable homes and to assist hard-working Caymanians to buy those homes. I'm delighted, Mr. Speaker, with the positive approach that the Trust has taken and the progress it has made in bringing home ownership within the grasp of deserving Caymanian families. I would like to thank the Minister for Housing for the leadership he has shown in working with the Trust as it delivers its mandate. Last year, 16 new homes were completed in Bordentown, and in January, we broke ground on a scheme in East End that will deliver another 6 homes. As the East End homes are finished, work will begin on 8 more homes in West Bay. Taken together, this means that 30 new homes are being built at affordable prices for Caymanians and their families. These homes, Mr. Speaker, are specifically aimed at the average Caymanian who just needs some extra help to realize his or her or their dreams. Looking ahead, the Trust has bold plans to extend its helping hand to still more deserving Caymanian families. The Trust is buying land on which to build in Northside and recently obtained a 24-acre plot of land in Georgetown for affordable housing. This kind of targeted support is important, but the government has also acted to provide help for other Caymanians wanting to own their own homes. We have significantly increased the stamp duty thresholds for first-time Caymanian buyers. This represents a welcome leg up onto the property ladder for many young Caymanians and their families. The government estimates that hundreds of Caymanian families will benefit from this change. We have also recognized that for a variety of reasons, often outside their control, some existing homeowners are living in conditions that are not really habitable. Again, government is extending a helping hand to those families to help them keep their roofs over their heads, often quite literally. The Housing Repair Assistance Committee has been reestablished, and we are working through the list of properties needing repair on a priority basis. In this way, some 22 Caymanian homeowners have been helped by this government so far this term. In the run-up to the last election, members from across the House heard from constituents that they were increasingly concerned about crime and the safety of their communities. A central plank of this government's program has been developed in response to those concerns. The first and most important part of our response is focused directly on what actually happens in communities. There was a feeling, I believe, that the police had lost touch with people and were not responding to genuine concerns that communities were raising. The current police commissioner, Derek Byrne, has achieved a real change in approach. Rightly, he has asked the elected government for support, not just in terms of his philosophy of policing, but in terms of hard cash to invest in the better, more responsive services that he's building. In the last budget, therefore, the government committed to funding 75 more police officers over a 3-year period. This has allowed the Commissioner to reinvigorate the neighborhood policing approach, improving visibility and response times, reassuring communities, and deterring crime. Increased numbers have also allowed the police to more effectively target prolific and persistent offenders. Our police officers deserve to operate from fit-for-purpose accommodation and to utilize reliable modern equipment. The government has funded a new digital forensic hub that enables the RCIPS to take on the new breed of cyber criminals. We will deliver the new police station that has been promised for West Bay, and the SPS also includes funding to enable the RCIPS headquarters to relocate to a new location in Georgetown. Modern and fully equipped new police vehicles will also come into service in the next 2-year period. But it is not just about policing. The safest communities are communities that help look after themselves. The government has therefore supported the development of new neighborhood watch schemes, and we have been delighted that so many citizens have been willing to take part in what now number over 30 such schemes across Cayman. This approach is paying off. Burglary was one of those crimes that people were becoming really concerned about, and we were seeing a spike in the numbers of crimes committed. In 2017, there were 515 burglaries committed that were reported on our 3 islands. Since then, persistent and prolific offenders have been targeted. And as the increased police numbers came on stream and neighborhood watch programs developed, those numbers have been reducing. The success of this can be seen in the 2018 number of burglaries, which fell to 324. However, there are 2 reasons not to go overboard in celebrating this data. First, crime statistics are notoriously volatile, and we will need to see a long-term trend before we can determine properly how things are working. Secondly, while the numbers are reducing, every burglary is a hardship for the household or business it affects, so there is more that we need to do. So the work continues, and the next step is to introduce new community support officers who will work within their neighborhoods. Their role will be to help the community police officers gather intelligence and develop relationships with local people and businesses. The recruitment process for 12 new community support officers is already underway. Mr. Speaker, the government will also implement a new anti-gang strategy. Work to develop the strategy has been underway for some time across government and the police, led by the Deputy Governor. The delivery of this strategy will be an important part in making our communities safer by disrupting and reducing gang activities. It will also improve the life chances of young people who otherwise might fall into criminality through their involvement in gangs. Gang activity is, of course, Mr. Speaker, often linked to drugs and firearms, and if we are able to reduce the risks associated with those problems, we need to improve the security of our borders. The creation of the new Customs and Border Control Service represents the significant action this government has taken in that regard. That is because the new service is not about some bureaucratic rearrangement of civil service responsibilities or about new logos and uniforms. Rather, it signals a shift to a more integrated and intelligence-led approach. That approach began to be introduced over the last year as the former Customs and Immigration departments began working more closely together in advance of the formal creation of the new service on 1st February this year. Already the results are significant, and the contribution that the CBC is making to keeping our borders more secure and our communities safer is clear. Throughout 2018, 63 persons were arrested by the CBC Enforcement Division, formerly part of the Customs Department, for various drugs and weapons offenses, including importation, possession with intent to supply, and conspiracy to import controlled substances. As the new integrated service was developed, customs officers also conducted 46 joint operations with the Department of Immigration and the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. The proactive patrols and joint operations, which mostly targeted individuals involved with drugs and weapons activities, resulted in several hundred pounds of drugs and multiple firearms being seized by officers. In addition, more than $250,000 in Cayman Islands dollars in cash suspected to be used in illegal activities was confiscated. By better targeting those attempting to carry out illegal activities, the new service is also able to make processes quicker and easier for legitimate travelers and businesses. The introduction of the red-green channel at the newly redeveloped airport is a good example, as is the pre-clearance service introduced at Miami International. Further innovations will follow. Just a couple of weeks ago, the service began the procurement process to select a partner to work with us on the introduction of new immigration and passport control kiosks, very like the ones many of you will have used when passing through immigration at overseas airports. We expect a pilot utilizing 4 such kiosks to be in place before the end of 2019. Also this year, Mr. Speaker, we will introduce a fully online visa application process. The other key change in terms of safety and security at our borders is the creation of the Cayman Islands Coast Guard. This innovation is modernizing Cayman's whole approach to maritime safety and security and bringing our islands into conformity with a series of international obligations. The Coast Guard will deliver further reductions in crime by giving our islands a significantly enhanced maritime capacity and capability, ensuring safe use of our waters for recreational and commercial vessels, and improving the competence and professionalism of our response capability for maritime search and rescue. The arrival last month of the new Airbus H145 helicopter, part funded by the United Kingdom government, is an important part of that additional response capability, as well as being part of our overall policing and security resource. The next significant development for the new Coast Guard service will see the opening in the coming weeks of the new Operations and Rescue Coordination Center that will play a key role in ensuring Cayman can coordinate search and rescue and other activities on a 24/7 basis. The effectiveness of our crime-fighting capability depends upon our ability to dispense justice efficiently, Mr. Speaker. The government has acted in response to the need to enhance our court capacity through the purchase last year of the former Scotia building. Judicial administration functions have already moved into the new facilities, easing the pressure on space in the existing court building. The rest of the building will be refurbished. A temporary courtroom will be in place and operational next year, and by early 2021, the permanent home for the new Court of Appeal will be ready. In the meantime, the business case for the potential overall redesign of our court facilities is being developed. A project for a new prison is also in the early planning stages, and the government will move this forward as part of the next budget. While improving the effectiveness of the criminal justice system is a landmark achievement of this administration, it is better to keep people out of the system altogether. Our approach to this is twofold. First, as I mentioned earlier, the anti-gang strategy is partly designed to prevent young people in particular from falling into criminality. Secondly, we must also make it easier for people who have had a criminal lifestyle to leave it and to stay out of it by improving the support we give to the rehabilitation of past offenders. One of the key enablers for successful rehabilitation, Mr. Speaker, is the ability of ex-offenders to access employment after their release. Preparing for that starts while still in prison. The prison service enables prisoners on release on temporary license to access community placements through initiatives such as the Fresh Start program. This flagship partnership with collaborators involves a range of private sector partners, and I thank them for their willingness to support Caymanians in this way. Mr. Speaker, you may have read in the press recently that one prisoner on placement as a trainee chef at a prestigious 7 Mile Beach hotel was named that organization's Employee of the Month. This can only be helpful in enabling that person access to a job on their release and avoiding being drawn back into crime. Government has stepped up to play its part over the last year. 3 prisoners are now engaged by the Department of Environmental Health. This is good for them and their prospects and a real help to the community as we continue to improve the garbage collection service. Mr. Speaker, the government has also begun a new program specifically designed to offer a fresh start in the civil service to Caymanian former offenders trying to get back into regular employment. A pilot is being run with 5 persons during this year. Keeping communities safe and secure also means preparing for national disasters and improving Cayman's resilience in the face of such disasters. For that reason, Mr. Speaker, the government's plans for the next period include the completion of the Bordentown Hurricane Shelter and the emergency shelter on Cayman Brac. Already this year, we have, with the help of the Governor's Office, upgraded the island's emergency disaster communications capability, learning lessons from the experience of some of our fellow overseas territories during Hurricane Irma. During Irma and the other hurricanes of 2017, our capacity to handle disasters was on display as we aided our sister British overseas territories in the region, not only with safety and security, but with medical assistance. Indeed, Cayman has developed some of the best health personnel and facilities in the region. We've also created a system of health insurance that provides effective cover for working families, coupled with the safety net of government-funded care for indigents, which ensures that the vast majority of Caymanians receive the care they need. Yet as Cayman and its population have changed, we have not always kept our health system responsive to those changes. Put simply, most Caymanians are now living far longer than they used to. Those welcome extra years of life are spent post-retirement and often without access to affordable health insurance. And inevitably, that longer life is coupled with one or more long-term health conditions that need to be managed so that our seniors can enjoy life as they deserve. These demographic pressures require us to look at a new approach. So the government consulted last year on the potential for a new post-65 health insurance program. We'll shortly bring proposals for how best to take this idea forward in a way that appropriately balances the responsibility of the individual with the support that government might provide. As we complete that work, we recognize that there are broader issues about the health insurance market that need to be addressed. The crucial part of that is the operation of Synico, and a review of the role it plays in the market is already underway. As I have said, Mr. Speaker, Cayman boasts world-class health facilities, and we are working on ways in which more Caymanians can benefit from these facilities, while we also work with the HSA to improve standards and services. One key development that the HSA intends to bring forward in that regard is the development of an enhanced medical facility and district clinic in Bordentown to better serve the people of the eastern districts. This new facility, when complete, would offer more medical services and relieve some of the pressures from our main hospital in Georgetown by offering additional primary medical care as well as X-ray facilities and dialysis. In order to enable the HSA to advance its plans for this new facility, the government has agreed to donate a suitable site for the project, and the HSA will fund the building from its own sources. Mr. Speaker, in my 2017 address, I updated this House on the efforts of the HSA to reduce the cost of pharmaceuticals and medical supplies through a reverse auction system. The reverse auction initiative was quite timely and became instrumental in tempering the impact of the increasing cost of drugs at source markets internationally, caused by mergers and acquisitions and global shortages in the provision of certain key drugs. Notwithstanding those factors driving up the cost of drugs in the market, the HSA was still able to realize savings in the unit cost of several pharmaceutical and medical supplies. For example, the cost of one imported cholesterol-reducing drug that was purchased in 2017 for $28.40 per pack was halved to $14 per pack in 2018 through the enhanced procurement process. These efforts will continue through the annual tendering process where more savings are expected to be realized. Mr. Speaker, sadly, a greater prevalence of mental illness also appears to be a function of modern life. We need to do more as a society to acknowledge and understand mental illness and to provide appropriate support for sufferers. Much of that support will be community-based. But for those suffering from mental illness who need more intensive care, we remain committed to building a new long-term residential facility on island. That new facility will mean we can provide excellent therapeutic care for patients here in Cayman rather than having to send our people to Jamaica or the USA for treatment. Mr. Speaker, I have to be frank here and say that we have not been able to progress this project as quickly as anyone would have wished. The problem is actually one caused by our buoyant construction market and the limited number of large-scale contractors on island. I commend the creativity of the project team in looking to repackage the work to make it more available to a broader section of the construction market. But regrettably, we still have not received sufficient bids to move the project forward at pace. The Ministry is working closely with the Major Projects Office to identify next steps to move this important and much needed project through the final stages of procurement. Mr. Speaker, I know that the Minister has been working diligently to move this forward, and he is as disappointed as I am. Indeed, as the government is, that this project has seen so many delays. But Mr. Speaker, I can confirm to this House and to the public that this government will find a way to move it ahead, despite the challenges, because we understand full well the necessity for this facility. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to mention two other important pieces of health-related work this government is taking forward. First, we brought to this House earlier this week the Health Care Decisions Bill, which obtained passage, which will make it possible for people to communicate their health care preferences before they are no longer able to make those desires known. This is important for individuals and families, but it's also something that medical professionals have been asking for in order to give more certainty to them in the important care decisions they make. Secondly, we passed the organ tissue transplant regulations that came into effect last July. The House will be aware of the lengthy process of ensuring we frame those regulations properly and that we put in place appropriate safeguards. I'm delighted that it is now possible to carry out transplant procedures on island, Mr. Speaker. It only takes one conversation with someone whose life has been saved or improved by a transplant to know the benefits this will bring to the people of these islands and beyond. Another aspiration for all Caymanian families is to see their children get on in the world. And key to that is the education that opens up opportunities for them. This government's first priority is to ensure those opportunities are available for our young people and drive up standards in school. To ensure that standards are improving, we cannot merely wait for test results for our children, but instead we need to ensure that the standard of teaching in schools is high, and in so doing will help ensure the success of our students when taking external examinations. That is why, Mr. Speaker, it was in the last term that we reintroduced the Schools Inspectorate, as well as carried out a baseline evaluation program to determine teaching and learning standards across all of our public schools. Recent inspection evaluations have indicated good progress at some schools, whilst others are not yet where we would like to see them. But the excellent news, Mr. Speaker, is that the Lighthouse School is the first Cayman Islands government school to earn an overall good rating under the new framework for school inspections that was adopted last year. All the other schools, except two, received ratings of satisfactory. I commend these schools and task all of our public schools, including the two that are below satisfactory, to rise to the challenge so that all of our public schools can be rated as excellent. Indeed, this is the expectation of this government, and we are working with all stakeholders to ensure this goal is achieved. Mr. Speaker, I have welcomed the determination that the Minister of Education has shown in driving forward the reforms necessary if our public schools are indeed to improve. From the start, the Minister has made clear that the key to that is to support the improvement of teaching in our schools. As unsurprisingly perhaps, it is the quality of teaching that makes the most difference to what our young people can achieve. The next budget provides the additional money needed to deliver on the pledge to raise teachers' pay to a monthly minimum of $5,000. This is essential if we are to attract and retain the best people as educators. Continuing and enhancing programs for teachers' development ensures they are equipped to deliver the kind of individualized, child-centered approach that gets the best out of our young people. The Minister has been ably supported by a dedicated and enthusiastic Education Council, and together they are setting the pace for an ongoing program of reform that will drive further improvement. The next step is to change the curriculum, and from this September, a new curriculum will be introduced into our primary schools based on the latest British schools curriculum. Some inside and outside the education establishment here have questioned whether this change is appropriate. They argue that Caymanian children may find the new curriculum too difficult. Mr. Speaker, call me a traditionalist if you will, but I thought that education was supposed to challenge young minds. Rather than believe they should somehow settle in advance for a level of mediocrity, I believe in our young people. I believe they're as capable of learning and developing as any in the UK or elsewhere in the world. Why should we limit what we expect of our children, or indeed what they should expect of themselves? If we are to challenge our young people, then we must match that with the right help and support. That is why we need to invest in the quality of teaching and in getting the right textbooks and other learning resources. This government is doing those things. And now, Mr. Speaker, here's a radical idea. Maybe, just maybe, it is not the good people in the Department of Education, many of whom rarely set foot inside a classroom, who are best placed to make decisions about what happens in those classrooms. Quality education comes not from the issuing of centrally driven policy documents, but from what happens in the interaction between teacher and student. Taking decisions closer to that moment of truth by delegating responsibility away from the department and towards schools, principals, and teachers will enable genuine improvement and innovation at the point where it really matters. So over the next 2 years, we will establish new governing bodies for Cayman's public schools and give them the responsibility for raising student levels of achievement. Those governing bodies will give parents, teachers, and the wider community a direct say in how their schools are run. While the Minister will continue to set the overall direction for the education system and will hold schools to account, it will increasingly be the schools themselves that decide what happens in Cayman's classrooms. Achievement for students will not always be in academic terms, and we must continue to do more to open up routes in technical and vocational education and training for young people. The comprehensive review we promised is nearing completion, and engagement of significant employers is helping to shape a range of exciting ideas. As we move to implement the agreed package of changes over the next 2 years, we will see more and more opportunities created for Cayman's young people. These will come in various forms, from traditional training programs to internships and apprenticeships, but in all cases, the focus is on giving young people the skills they need to compete in an increasingly complex global jobs market. Mr. Speaker, as is often the case these days, government is leading the way and playing its own part in helping young Caymanians to gain the necessary skills and qualifications for the future. The Public Works Department runs the very successful City and Guilds Vocational Studies Program, which has grown over the past 2 years and today provides a variety of training courses to some 17 Caymanian apprentices. We will now expand the program and build a brand new facility to serve at least 50 students next year, with training provided in a number of fields, including air conditioning, plumbing, electrical trades, and carpentry. And of course, the good work continues at the nursing school and the hospitality school, both of which are affiliated with UCCI and provide excellent career opportunities for our young people. Mr. Speaker, we have not forgotten, and we will not forget or neglect the education and development of young people with special needs. I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, that I do not believe in setting limits on our expectations for our Caymanian young people. I apply that to all young people, and this government has set about delivering more support to those with special needs in all of our educational settings so that they can grow, learn, and fulfill their God-given potential. Lighthouse School, by way of example, has set a challenging path in this respect. As a result, for the first time in the school's history, on the 14th of June 2018, 7 students successfully passed Stage 1 City and Guild exams. With those qualifications that are recognized worldwide behind them, a whole new range of opportunities is opened up for those 7 young people, both in further education and in the workplace. I want publicly to congratulate Principal Brian and his team for all the work that went in to support those successful students. But most of all, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate those 7 incredible students. I hope the House will join me in celebrating their achievement, and I will just pause to read their names so that the nation's pride in them can be reflected in the official record of our proceedings here today. The students are Linval Forshaw, Marlon Bodden, Chelsea Frederick, Kenu McKenzie, Dante Thompson, Julia Smith, and Unique Ebanks. Mr. Speaker, this allergy won't give me a break at all, sir. It is not just the needs of young people with special needs that this government is addressing. Plans are agreed for a new Sunrise adult training facility, and that facility should be fully operational by early 2021. It will include better and more modern equipment and significantly enhance the opportunities available for learning and personal development for some 150 adults that the facility will cater to. The other commitment we made to the country on education, Mr. Speaker, was to invest significantly in improving and expanding schools themselves. That is the physical plant. I am pleased to report, Mr. Speaker, that the new John Gray High School campus project is underway again, and the target of completing the project in time for the 2021-2022 academic year is ambitious but achievable, provided there are no significant delays in the procurement or build-out of the new school. The House will be aware of the Minister's announcement of a phased approach to the project, and this should allow some of the new facilities to come into use in advance of September 2021. We are aware that there are capacity and other issues elsewhere in the education system, and we are tackling those as resources allow. Other capital investments this year include, in this SPS, 3 new classrooms at Red Bay and construction of a hall at Bodden Town. We're also looking to improve the outdoor sporting facilities at a number of our public schools. We're constructing new artificial turf football fields at Red Bay Primary, Bodden Town Primary, and Prospect Primary. Additionally, we are building artificial turf play fields at Spot Bay Primary, in Cayman Brack, and East End Primary. Running tracks were installed at Edna Mall and Sir John A. Cumber, and work has also commenced to install one at Red Bay. Mr. Speaker, sports play an important part in our community. And so I am proud that in less than 2 weeks, the Cayman Islands will host the 2019 Carifta Games. This provides not only an opportunity for our young athletes to perform at home at a major regional sports event, but it also provides opportunities for Caymanians to attend and see our athletes compete with some of the best in the region. I would like to thank the Councillor for Sports for his ongoing work in supporting the government's sports programs. Government's other vital role is to support the most vulnerable in our communities. Sometimes, sadly, that support needs to be about protection, and this government has shown it is willing to tackle some of the long-standing issues in our society that have been too long ignored or swept under the carpet. In partnership with the RCIPS, we some years ago opened the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, known as MASH, as a vital initiative to improve child safeguarding and to tackle domestic I am so grateful for the concern and assistance being provided me. I'll read that paragraph again, Mr. Speaker. In partnership with the RCIPS, we some years ago opened the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, known as MASH, as a vital initiative to improve child safeguarding and to tackle domestic violence. MASH continues as a key tool to not only catch perpetrators, but to support victims. It may seem strange to hear me say so, Mr. Speaker, but I am delighted that as our people come to understand the functioning of MASH, referrals are going up. I do not believe that is because the problems it is tackling are growing necessarily, but instead that individuals are more willing to make those referrals because they know positive actions will follow. Mr. Speaker, improving reporting and more effective response is one thing. What we want to do, however, is to reduce risk and prevent harm in the first place. One good example of how we are tackling that is the Ministry of Education's program to ensure contracted service workers at the Department of Education Services and staff in all early childhood care and education centers are trained in child protection and have policies, procedures, and practices in place to minimize risk for children. Last year, the ministry completed such training for well over 500 individuals working in various capacities with children. Government actions that directly deliver improvements in safeguarding arrangements include the completion of the redevelopment of the residential facility at Northward to allow for the appropriate segregation of children and adults. Support is also about extending a helping hand, Mr. Speaker. Here, government is fulfilling the commitment we gave to overhaul our approach to social assistance programs. We have implemented a series of quick fixes to tackle some of the immediate problems and improve the systems in place. For example, we have instituted a solution that enables landlords participating in the rental assistance program to receive a direct electronic payment from government. This means that they get paid in full in a timely way, which is encouraging landlords to take part in the program. Their tenants are benefiting as the landlords are given more security rather than them having to constantly threaten to quit the program because of payment problems. We recognize, though, Mr. Speaker, that there is a limit to the improvements we can make because, frankly, the legislation and other procedures around welfare are hopelessly out of date. Accordingly, the Ministry of Community Affairs has undertaken 2 rounds of consultation with service users, charitable organizations, and others, looking at how we can completely reshape the social assistance framework in the Cayman Islands. I'm very grateful to the Councillor for Community Affairs for the leadership he has put into this work. The result will be legislative changes and more customer-focused processes that mean we can deliver on the promise we made to put in place social assistance programs that get the right help to the right people at the right time. As we promised, Mr. Speaker, the government has taken forward the work necessary to begin the implementation of the older persons policy. The Council is up and running and has been leading the engagement program across our districts to work with older persons on their priorities for action. Although the policy looks to long-term goals, I am pleased to see how active the Council has been in promoting the economic, social, and cultural inclusion of older people. But there's more that we can do to assist our senior citizens today. I noted earlier that we had increased various social assistance payments to older persons and retired civil servants to a minimum of $750 per month. I am also pleased to announce today that government will look at what fees or duties can be reduced for senior citizens, persons older than 60 years, that is. We will finalize this list of senior citizen discounts in time for the next budget. We expect to include items such as driver's license fees, work permit fees for caregivers, and trade and business license fees for older persons with their own businesses. I hope that this will encourage more in the private sector to follow suit. Similarly, the well-being of our young people and the development of their self-esteem is becoming an increasingly important issue in our society. The role that KEYS, Children and Youth Services, plays, that is the Children and Youth Services Foundation plays, can be crucial, but we need to ensure that it is producing impactful programs in the best and most efficient way, especially in the context of the work also being done by the voluntary sector. The government is therefore reviewing the role of KEYS, and I expect any changes to be brought forward shortly. It would be a mistake, however, Mr. Speaker, if we somehow fell into just seeing young people as potential victims in our society, needing government or charities to support them. Young people are vibrant and a vital part of our society, and so many of them are not only self-sufficient, but already willing to do their part to support others and make a difference in their community. For that reason, I was delighted by the success last June of Cayman's first ever student volunteer program fair that brought together hundreds of students from 6 local high schools and representatives of 20 charitable organizations. Across the board, government customer service is improving. The Deputy Governor's Customer Service Program is transforming the everyday experience of public services. Consistently high levels of customer satisfaction of over 90% are being shown in the happy or not performance statistics for high-volume transactional services. While these are important, Mr. Speaker, it is the potential of the e-government program to increase accessibility and drive efficiency that personally I find the most exciting. E-government has already revolutionized the cargo customs declaration process. Over 5,100 such declarations per month were made during last year, representing around 92% of the total. Similarly, the vast majority of Caymanian companies are now choosing to conduct their business with government online. Over 96% of company registrations, annual returns, and director changes are now being made digitally. Usage of the online criminal record certificate process is increasing rapidly as awareness of the facility grows, and I'm confident that other services such as vehicle and driver license renewals will also become more popular over time. Another helpful innovation has been the introduction last November of text reminder messages for expiring vehicle licenses. Nearly 8,000 reminders were sent in the first full month alone. What all of this is showing, Mr. Speaker, is that the e-government program has the potential for a huge positive impact on the daily lives of Caymanians and residents. Further significant new e-services are on the way, and in order to facilitate them, the government is contracting for a new identity and access management solution. As we offer more and more services online, it is vital that government can verify identity and that the citizen can trust that only they can access their information. The solution is therefore accompanied by a range of security enhancements, including improved firewalls. The appointment of a Chief Information Security Officer to government service will ensure we keep pace with ever more complex security requirements of the digital age. Getting the right expertise is important. We have taken the same approach with the appointment of a Director of Government Communications. She's improving our capability to engage properly with our people based on a better understanding of what our people want and need from us. The major communications innovation in the coming year will be the launch of a new government website that will act as a single, timely, authoritative source of public information, both on a daily basis and in time of national emergency. Mr. Speaker, this government has a track record of delivery and achievement, and we are doing it all in a fiscally responsible way. What this SPS shows is that we will conclude our 8-year period in government following the same principles of sound financial management that we committed to at the start. While the 2021 election seems a long way away, this is in effect the pre-election budget of this unity government. We have, however, as has been our practice, resisted any temptation to pursue reckless spending plans in the run-up to the election. Instead, this SPS will once more be delivered in full conformity with the Public Management and Finance Law. We are maintaining the duty reductions of the last administration and sticking to our pledge not to increase any existing fees or taxes. Instead, we are generating additional headroom to fund investment in public services through internal efficiencies. The cost of pay increases we have delivered to civil servants are being met from within existing budgets rather than by adding to them. That represents efficiencies of nearly $12 million a year. Additional efficiencies are being realized through e-government and new procurement procedures. The coming budget delivers a sustainable long-term position for public finances and operational surpluses, capital investments being financed with cash, and debt being paid down. Indeed, this year, we will see a very significant reduction in public sector debt as we repay around 40%, or about $125 million of the bullet bond payment that falls due in November. This track record of responsible stewardship of the public finances is not just an achievement for this government. It is one that will continue to benefit those governments that come after us. I must congratulate the Minister of Finance and his ministry team for what I believe is one of the most significant long-term achievements of this government. I have spent my time today, Mr. Speaker, detailing the delivery of the plans this government placed before the country nearly 2 years ago. I have set out both the progress we have made to date and how we will go on and deliver against the remaining commitments over the next 2 years. However, no plan can foresee every eventuality, and so over that 2-year period, we have had to reprioritize some things and deal with things that we had not expected. Therefore, we are making some adjustments to the detailed targets in the SPS that is coming to the House today. It was British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan who, when asked by a journalist what was most likely to blow a government off course, that replied, "Events, dear boy, events." This government is no exception, and one such event that threatened to blow us off course was when the UK Parliament passed the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Act last May. The act threatened Cayman and our overseas territories' sisters with the imposition of public registers of beneficial ownership. I was clear in setting out my concerns over the move at the time. First, the requirement is unreasonable and unnecessary. There is no international regulatory standard for such public registers, and indeed it is a standard to which few, if any, competitor jurisdictions even aspire. Given our information exchange arrangements with tax authorities across the world, there is simply no need to publicize the registers we hold. I should say not just tax authorities, but law enforcement authorities as well, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, and in my view most significantly, this is a matter that is properly for the locally elected government to determine, and this attempt by the UK Parliament to interfere in our business represents a severe constitutional overreach. This second criticism has the most far-reaching potential impact, because once the UK Parliament does this a first time, who knows when and over what other issue they might decide to do so again. Both the subsequent attempts to legislate to reduce the proposed 2023 timeline for imposing any such requirement for public registers, and the recent report from the UK's Foreign Affairs Committee have only reinforced my initial concerns. For that reason, over the last 9 months or so, I have been leading negotiations with the UK government to try to put in place new constitutional safeguards. To be clear, I am not seeking to grab more powers for Cayman or remove anything from the UK that is rightly their responsibility. Rather, I am trying to better delineate our respective rights and responsibilities. It is not so much a new constitutional settlement as a clarification of the settlement we thought we had received in 2009 that I seek. Mr. Speaker, it is only 2 weeks or so since the hugely successful visit to our islands by the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. And what a success that was, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure that I am speaking for the whole House when I thank the team from across government that worked tirelessly with the Governor's office to ensure the whole event ran so smoothly. I know that their Royal Highnesses enjoyed their visit to our shores, and it was great to see so many Caymanians turn out to see them. In particular, a large number of young Caymanians were able to take part during the visit, and I know their memories of this time will stay with them, just as ours have of previous royal visits. What the whole occasion underlined, Mr. Speaker, is how much these islands are British and want to remain British. We have come a long way as a people over the last 60 years, but our affection for the royal family remains one of the defining features of Caymanian society. Our future constitutional arrangements are therefore not designed to be some kind of precursor to independence. Far from it. We need these new arrangements to ensure that ours remains a respectful relationship where our respective roles are clearly defined, well understood, and respected. The latest talks were held in London in December. Our requests have been generally well received, and I'm encouraged by the willingness of the UK to respond positively to what I believe to be a sensible and pragmatic set of proposals we have put to them. Clearly, we will not get everything we have asked for, but the negotiations are proceeding well, and I'm hopeful that they will be brought to a positive conclusion in the coming months. I was hoping, Mr. Speaker, that we would have reached an agreement with the UK in time for the celebration of the 60th anniversary of our very first written constitution in July this year, as part of the Celebrate Cayman festivities. However, we, like the rest of the world, are at the mercy of the ongoing Brexit negotiations. Mr. Speaker, I think that for our colleagues in the UK Parliament, Brexit has probably escalated to beyond something even Prime Minister Macmillan, who I referred to earlier, might describe as merely an event. There have been times in this House, Mr. Speaker, when I have wondered if we were not simply going around in circles. But watching events unfold in Westminster over the course of the past months has shown me just how purposeful our debates here truly are. Mr. Speaker, as I have said before, It is not for us to do anything other than watch whatever happens. And whatever happens, we will deal with it. Brexit is both a threat and an opportunity. Naturally, the UK's focus in the run-up to Brexit and then in dealing with its impact will largely be in its own self-interest. If Cayman's interests are to be well represented by the UK, we need to do our part and make ourselves easy to deal with. Of more significance potentially are the opportunities that the UK's Global Britain initiative could bring to Cayman if we put ourselves in the best possible position to exploit those opportunities. For in this and other regards, the last 2 years have indeed presented us with new opportunities. The invitation from Dr. Liam Fox, the UK Secretary of State for International Trade, for the Cayman Islands to accompany him to the Great Festival in Hong Kong earlier last year was a real eye-opener. To be honest, Mr. Speaker, I was initially somewhat skeptical about the value of traveling all that way, but the experience has led me to believe that as we think about the future of our islands, we must also consider Cayman's future place in the world. To that end, I announced in the autumn of last year this government's intention to create a new Ministry of International Trade, Investment, Aviation, and Maritime Affairs. It was obvious in Hong Kong that compared to other governments, our individual ministries' activities appear disjointed and uncoordinated from the point of view of our partners overseas in both the public and private sectors. Opportunities to present a coherent and consistent approach to governments and potential investors and partners are therefore being missed. Over time, the new ministry will develop a network of international offices in strategic locations where the interest of Cayman will be best served, including support for financial services and tourism. Proposals for such offices will be brought forward on a case-by-case basis, and the first business case for the establishment of an Asia office has been developed and approved. The establishment of the Cayman Islands Government Office Asia will create a focal point to promote all aspects of the jurisdiction in an increasingly significant market. It will strengthen and deepen business ties and provide a gateway for future trade and investment. It will also facilitate the development of cultural ties and humanitarian links between Asia and these islands. In setting up both a new ministry and an Asia office, the case for change is underpinned by the view that international issues will become increasingly important to the well-being of these islands. And Mr. Speaker, speaking of a case for change, with the transformation of our labor and immigration regimes into two separate specialist entities, that is Workforce Opportunities and Residency Cayman, or WORC, and Customs and Border Control, it is appropriate to change the name of the ministry responsible for these two departments from the Ministry of Human Resources and Immigration to the Ministry of Employment and Border Control. This name better defines the work of that ministry, and henceforth it will be known as such. So, Mr. Speaker, as I reach the end of this long speech, and as we reach the midpoint of this government's term in office, I think we can draw some pretty clear conclusions about its effectiveness. The future is uncertain, and in a world where we are increasingly unable to rely on the norms of the past to hold, it is vital that our three small islands prepare for whatever the future will bring. That is why my government has been willing to take long-term decisions that increase our resilience, reduce our risk, and better place us to grasp the opportunities that will come our way. We are focused on the long-term economic well-being of our country, willing to take the difficult decisions to go ahead with the port project because of both the long-term prosperity of our cruise industry and the demands of a growing population for imported cargo require it. We are sowing the seeds for the future diversification that our economy needs, and we've established a new ministry to attract the future investment we need in order to prosper. We have created the capacity and capability within government to plan properly with the private sector to ensure our people can fill the jobs of the future. We are making the fundamental changes in education that will drive up standards and also offer more effective routes into work via technical and vocational education and training. We are investing in infrastructure that not only just catches up on our historic backlog, but begins to properly address future needs. We are planning properly to meet the future land use needs of a dynamic economy and a growing population. From sustainable energy to public transport to taller buildings, we have shown a willingness to embrace new ideas if they bring long-term benefits to our people. But our eyes are not just fixed on a future horizon. Most importantly, we can see this government's continuing delivery of its commitments impacting positively here and now on the lives of Caymanians. Mr. Speaker, you can feel that impact directly if you are one of the 3,300 Caymanians who are in work now, having not had a job when this government took office in 2013. You can see it in the more visible police presence that is helping to keep our people safer. You can hear it in the classrooms where students are already benefiting from the improved teaching that inspectors are seeing from teachers who feel more valued and supported by this government. And as we look ahead, Mr. Speaker, there is yet more that we need to do. What the strategic policy statement demonstrates is that we are a government that will do it. If you are still without a job, then the developments that work is implementing will improve your chances of getting one. For those in work looking to advance, the implementation of the new accreditation scheme and the creation of the Fair Employment Opportunities Commission will incentivize business to give you more opportunities. For those who need some more support, the changes planned to our social assistance programs will ensure you get the right help when you need it. If you are a student looking to advance in the world of the future, the new curriculum will challenge you, but we will ensure your teachers are equipped to give you the support you need. If you are a parent or business person concerned about the education of our children, the creation of governing bodies for our public schools will give you a direct involvement in what happens in schools. For commuters and parents suffering the grind of daily travel from the east into and out of Georgetown, we will deliver a comprehensive package of highway improvements that tackle congestion. And we will also look for progressive solutions to address future public transportation needs. For everyone, Cayman will be a cleaner, safer, greener place to live. Cleaner as we deal with the growing litter problem. Safer as our border security and community safety approaches combine to reduce crime and criminality. Greener as we create more public open spaces. Mr. Speaker, in all that I've said, I omitted to mention the incredible success of our special needs students or special needs people. In all that I've said about them, I omitted to say congratulations to them on the tremendous success they've achieved at the most recent Special Olympics. Mr. Speaker, this is a government with a track record of delivery to be proud of. I want to thank all my colleagues in caucus and in cabinet, including the Honorable Attorney General and Honorable Deputy Governor. A special thanks to His Excellency the Governor for the work that he has done so far to not only help guide, but also to support the work of myself and the government. Mr. Speaker, I also appreciate the support that you have provided in not only forming the unity government, but also in working with me in the best interest of the people of these islands. Who knows, Mr. Speaker, we may have found a good working formula. And if so, that bodes well for the next elections. I also wish, Mr. Speaker, to thank all chief officers and other public servants who have worked and who are still working to deliver on the priorities of the government. Certainly my chief officers, including Cabinet Secretary Samuel Rose, Eric Bush, Wesley Howell, and Teresa Echenike, have certainly have been an immense help to me, as has the staff in the Office of the Premier, led by Sir Roy Tatum, ably assisted by Kieran Stigant, Julia Hutton, Tammy Chisholm, Frank Cornwall, and Jana Pucci Bush. And, Mr. Speaker, I should also add our grateful thanks to the clerk and the staff of this Legislative Assembly for all of the support they continue to give us late into the hours of the night, with very unreasonable demands being made by other members, not by me. Mr. Speaker, it has been a team effort to have accomplished all that we have done to date. However, I am not complacent, and as I said at the start of my speech, these next 2 years will not be a gradual winding down towards the next election, but instead, it will be a ramping up so that I and the unity government that I lead will accomplish all that we can for the benefit of our beloved islands and people. There is much more this country needs and much more this government will do. My pledge, Mr. Speaker, to the country today is to give everything I have to get it done. I thank you for your attention.
Does any other member wish to speak? That's all you need, 5 minutes. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'm calling the mover to, she's ready to reply. The member for West. Boddown West.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, I think Winston Churchill said it best. History will be kind to me because I intend to write it. And after listening to the Premier's speech, it's clear that he has definitely decided to write his own political history. And Mr. Speaker, I want to open up by thanking the Premier, because this is actually his last strategic policy statement. And I realize he's probably in his legacy mode now. In his first strategic policy statement that was issued, that he delivered 2 years ago, he said he was going to be bold and leave everything on the field. I remember that. And first and foremost, Mr. Speaker, I am a citizen of this country, and I want the best of my country, and I hope that everything that the government promises to do, they are successful in doing. As I said last night, none of us in this honorable house, regardless of where we sit, should ever want the government to fail, and I say that to people also outside of this honorable house. At the end of the day, we are a democratic society, and it is a system that caters for differences, discord, dissent, disagreements, but it also tells us that we should have discussions and debate, have conversations, and find some level of consensus. I am also happy, Mr. Speaker, to hear that the government intends to make some very hard decisions, because there are some hard decisions that we need to make, especially with regards to health care delivery in this country, access, affordability, and also with the level of savings with regards to pension and everything else. And this is something that we look forward to working with the government with if needs be. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, regardless of where we sit, each member in this House, whether they speak or don't speak, is still 1/19 of the owners of all the challenges of that this country faces. And every one of us has a part to play within that process in terms of finding solutions to those challenges. I also recognize, Mr. Speaker, just looking at the length of the delivery, it is just short of a master's thesis in terms of length. I also recognize that at least a couple hundred public servants, both within core civil service and also in the statutory authorities, that would have worked on creating this SPS, and it would have to be a special kind of ignorance to really get up at this point and try to critique it or oppose it or anything like that. And bear in mind, we're now, as per what the Honorable Minister of Finance delivered this morning, we have now passed the $1 billion revenue mark within the country, and I think that's actually a great achievement for us as a people and a country, that we have now entered into the $1 billion revenue mark. And I think it says something about us in terms of where we're growing when we consider from whence we came. So I think that in itself is something that all Caymanians should be proud of, that our economy has now grown to that size. I recognize also that the strategic policy statement is the precursor to what it is that the budget will entail. And as such, the devil will always be in the details. But for right now, this is the strategic policy statement as outlined the government's intention over the next 2 years. And all I can say is that I wish them luck in achieving all of it. I believe every citizen should also wish them luck, and if needs be, pray that they achieve it. And each one of us will have to play our part within the political process and the democratic process of making sure that there's a proper checks and balances, but more importantly, that whatever policies that we agree and push through is still to the benefit of all Caymanians and ultimately improve their quality of life. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank the Premier for his service to this country. This is the last strategic policy statement, and I think at the end of the day, every one of us in this House owes him some gratitude for his service to the country. As I said before, and my colleague from Eastern have said before, he could have stayed in the private sector and become very rich, and he chose public service, and at the end of the day, that still means a lot to me. And I think at the end of the day, public service is still a noble cause for many people. And for that, we're eternally grateful. So, Mr. Premier, I wish you and your government luck in all of this. And I know the last time we were very easy on him, he beat us up 2 years ago, but that is fine, because come a few months down, we'll have the budget to go deal with. Anyway, thank you all and God bless.
Is there any other the member from Newlands?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish I could be as gracious as my colleague from Borden Town West. And I am. No, I completely agree with my colleague, Mr. Speaker. First of all, this was a lengthy presentation, a thorough presentation, comprehensive, and it wouldn't be just and fair for me to sit here now and try to critique all that we've just heard, Mr. Speaker, because it wouldn't be fair to either side of this House. Haven't had the time to sit down and do the necessary research and so forth. But I will say that I also want to join my colleague in thanking the Premier for delivering his last SPS to this Honorable House. He has, I think, raised the bar in his representation as Premier of this country, and I have to give him his kudos for that. I'm not going to say that I will go away and come back and agree with everything that the government has proposed in their SPS for the country. However, I do bear in mind, Mr. Speaker, that the members on that side of the House represent more constituents than the members on this side. The members on that side have the resources committed to putting forward these solutions. And it isn't simply my role as a member of the opposition to find everything I can critique it and oppose. I will continue to support those things that I see that are good for this country. And I do see things in this SPS that are good for this country, Mr. Speaker. A lot of people have wondered why I've been so silent on the changes in immigration and human resources and labor. And it's because I wanted to give the Premier, the leader of that ministry, the opportunity to do what he had to do without me interfering and getting in the way. Now, when the solutions come forward and we see that things need to be fixed, my role as a member of the opposition is to make suggestions and proposals to fix them. But I didn't think it was my business to try to interject and interfere while a major change was happening. So I will continue to employ that approach, Mr. Speaker, but have no fear. I will continue to advocate strongly for my constituents, and when I see the need for me to stand up and make a suggestion or ask for a change of approach, I will do that. But I think the government has to be given a chance to go forward with its mandate. We on this side will go forward with ours. And as we've seen on a few occasions in this sitting, Mr. Speaker, we have come together and done things in the best interest of the country. And I think that that is the best way to approach these things. I've never been in a heated argument with someone that someone didn't walk away feeling offended or rubbed the wrong way. I think it's better when you sit down with cool heads and figure things out. Not to say that we're waving the white flag over here, Mr. Speaker, but you know, in the spirit of cooperation and doing what is best for the people of this country, I think that is the approach we have to take wherever possible. So I want to congratulate the government. They put a lot of hard work into their plans, and I look forward to the implementation of most of what I've heard here today. Thank you.
The member from East End.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thought I would have been would have had the opportunity to rise first, but because my good friend seems to revel in the fact that he is leaving, he took quite a while. Mr. Speaker, it is somewhat unreasonable and to expect from the public to expect us to respond to a nigh on 3-hour delivery by a government on what their plans are for the future for their last 2 years in this legislature, in this session. So I think it is only fair that we will, those of us on this side, would scrutinize what the government is saying and hopefully have a response to those things that we see the details will not work. But Mr. Speaker, it has always been my view that despite the acrimonious nature of politics, that one does not attack the principles, but it is always the methods, and the devil is in the methods used. I believe that the government is genuine. I heard the Premier say that they have worked hard. I believe that. I believe that they have worked hard in the interests of this country, and like any government should do. I didn't expect any less from him. Every government in every country has that awesome responsibility of the distribution of the resources of the country to ensure its citizens are better off. In many areas, I believe, over the last few years, there are Caymanians who have felt the benefit, but there are still those who do not feel that. And it's the responsibility, first responsibility of the government to do that. And secondly, is the responsibility of any full legislature to support that. And that I will do when it is necessary and when I have the opportunity thereto. Mr. Speaker, the Premier and I entered these hallowed halls on the same day. My returns came in before him. So that made me MLA-elect before him. I trust he remembers that. Unfortunately, the roles were reversed on the 15th day of November 2000 when he was sworn in before me. So he likes to think that that trumps my early election over him. Mr. Speaker, he and I have worked on both sides of this aisle and somewhere in between. What I do know, and this is on his departure, this is for his departure. What I do know is that we approached this with everything we had in us. I do know that we gave up much to go in service of our people. I do know that when the chips were down, we were there. When we had to fight, we fought. When we had to support, we did. But in most instances, we laid our markers down. I will never forget my maiden speech in this Parliament when I said I would support, but no one should take that as an indication of me rolling over. Mr. Speaker, the greatest thing that I know about that gentleman is that the two of us made a commitment when we came in here. Crying for what? No, I'm suffering from my sinuses too. No, I'm suffering from my cry. You don't need tears. Mr. Speaker, I know the commitment we made when we came in here about honesty. And I know, Mr. Speaker, unless he tells me that he did it, I know he will demit office with his head high. And no one can convince me, unless it's him, that he took anything from this country. I don't know who else will or who else has, because I have no evidence to that fact. But when he leaves in the not too distant future, I am sure he will hold his head high and walk with his back straight in this country. I don't know where he's going, because he can't get red mole under his fingernails, but he'll be up in there looking at that as well. I don't know what the future holds for anyone else, and I don't know what it holds for him, but I wish him well in his journey, wherever that may take him. And I do know that he will take on that journey with honesty, integrity, and justice for all. I thank him for his service. One day, maybe I'll have to bid farewell to myself. But for he won't run for that position again. Not now. And Mr. Speaker, I'm used to reading obituaries. But certainly an obituary, not in this case, not in death, but position that he cannot hold for a while. Long before he gets back, if I'm still here, I'll be gone. Mr. Speaker, I hope he will take the advice that I have always said. I've always said that I didn't support 2 years limit on premiership? I did not. You can ask him. 2 terms. I agreed with it afterwards, reluctantly. But having seen that operation in this country, maybe I was wrong. Anyone who has served there for 2 terms needs to go home. And no matter want to go, they need to go. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I will scrutinize these documents, as I always do, and I will see where he has or what he is planning on doing, and I will hold the government into account, which is my responsibility, to ensure that the distribution of those resources that they hold the responsibility for is done in an equitable manner. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my good friend for his service, 18 years of service thus far, and the last 2 of his service to the country. Thank you.
Member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Don't worry about the standing on plan be that long. Mr. Speaker, I want to say congratulations, if I can say that, to the Premier to be the first Premier to be able to give 2 strategic policy statements back to back. And like the other members have suggested earlier, it's going to be very difficult for any member to give critique, not criticism, but critique of what the government's plan is for the next 2 years of the administration. But if I had to take just by the words of this document a grade, I would definitely say that I think there's a lot of great things within the strategic policy statement that the country should be excited about, and if and when the necessary funding is allocated to the policy to support the implementation of it, it's a good path to a place that we want to be as Cayman. As politics goes, I guess it's expected for me to find something wrong, but I haven't found anything wrong, Mr. Speaker, at least not so far. I want to share an experience, though, and no place for the soft stuff, but a lot of people know about my relationship with the Premier. And a lot of people know that I have a hard head. And of course, when I first got into politics, the Premier was the individual who gave me the opportunity to get involved in politics. And like most politicians, they thought they can come and change the whole world quite quickly, and not understanding the hard work that takes to get it done. And, Mr. Speaker, I was just outside with my colleague from Prospect and talking about his ability to put together 30 pages in such a seamless way of a clear pathway for an average person to understand very complex roadmap to the future. It's not an easy job, not an easy job at all. I must congratulate him for putting a plan together, regardless if we agree with it or not. The job to do this for 2 terms with the headaches of people like myself behind him all the time and members of the opposition behind him all the time. You involved in it too. It is not an easy task. But Mr. Speaker, by all means, we still got a long way to go. We're in the middle of an administration, and they still got a lot of work to do. They have to find the money to put towards these initiatives, but we can clearly see that there is a plan, and a plan that all the members on the government side have worked hard together, showing that the unity government can work together, because nobody's disagreeing that they don't have piece of this plan or their mark on part of this plan in there. So one would assume that it's all members, including the progressives, independents, and part of your group as well, Mr. Speaker. So I think rather than trying to find something to critique, I want to highlight some things that I found was really, really positive. Right now is my time, Mr. Speaker. So I want to take the opportunity. Well, Mr. Speaker, if you want to take the break now, I'd be happy to sit down and come back.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rather than critique, I thought there were some things that I found that were good that was in the strategic policy statement that I wanted, and I am happy that the government is doing it. And I hope that if there's anything that I can do as a legislator to assist the administration, please, please feel free to reach out, because I would be happy to help the people of this country. Particularly on page 15, Mr. Speaker, where the Premier speaks about open space that our people can enjoy is also an important part of the community infrastructure. We're progressing the project to enhance Smith Barcadere, and more importantly to me, and we have purchased Central Park to safeguard public access. Now, obviously the Premier in this speech probably haven't gone down into detail of what public access means, but I can make an assumption that eventually that area will be secured for the members of the community, not only in Georgetown Central or Scranton, but the greater Cayman and the greater Georgetown. And I want to say thank you to the Honorable Premier, to the Honorable Minister of Lands, and to this administration for purchasing that. On behalf of the people of Georgetown Central, thank you. And if there's anything I can do to offer this administration in assistance to get that best for the people of Georgetown Central, I'm at your disposal at any time. So thank you. Mr. Speaker, the Premier also spoke about helping much of the less fortunate on page 16 of some existing homes and owners who are living in conditions that are not really habitable. And it went on to say, again, the government is extending a helping hand to those families to help them keep their roof over their heads, often literally. I agree with him, Mr. Speaker. And I am glad that the government acknowledges that many of those Caymanians are the people that I worry about every day in and out, who don't always have the opportunities to help themselves. And I'm glad to see that the Premier has said they are making provisions already underway that 22 Caymanian homeowners are being helped when they can't help themselves. But I ask the administration consider some of my constituents. Though I am unaware of exactly those 22 Caymanians who've got assistance, and I think they're obviously deserving of those assistance, but there are many in my community as well that may need it. If there's anything that I can do to help with the process, or if there's someone within your administration that is willing to sit with me to meet with my constituents who may need this kind of assistance, please reach out to me, because it's important that I get the assistance on behalf of my people of Georgetown Central. Mr. Speaker, also on page 22, in respect to education, the Premier spoke about establishing new governing bodies for Cayman public schools to give them their responsibility for raising their student level achievements. I think this strategy is one that I could truly endorse because I believe only when you get the community, the parents, the teachers, and the leadership of the schools involved in the growth and success of the school, only truly then can we get the best success. And it's a plan that I endorse, and I would be supporting in any way I can. Mr. Speaker, the Premier also spoke about...
Honorable Member, we have reached the hour 4:30. Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move suspension of Standing Order 10-2 in order that the business of the House may continue beyond the hour of interruption.
Question is that Standing Order 10-2 be suspended in order to carry on after 4:30. All in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Honorable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just for the edification of the members of the House, I don't intend to be very much longer. Mr. Speaker, the Premier also spoke about some of the initiatives of this administration in respect to training. But, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, I did not hear a lot of discussions about trainings for persons who have already left school. And it is an area of concern for many people across the Cayman Islands, but also in my constituency. And just to give you a little light of what I'm speaking about, I am talking about persons who may not have done so well in school and for some reason or another maybe left school without a diploma and has been removed from the education system for quite some time, usually in their mid-20s to their early 30s, who, because of failings in their past life, have been unable to get the characteristics and the education necessary to be in the workforce, which is sometimes perceived to not be willing to give Caymanians as much opportunity as possible. So I'm begging, I plead on behalf of many of those persons that find themselves in those types of positions to consider not only the ones who are in school or just about to leave school to go on to these types of programs, but to potentially offer training opportunity for persons who are removed from school already but don't have training opportunities available to them, because it could definitely help even reduce that unemployment number even more than it is. Mr. Speaker, the Premier also spoke about forgive me, Mr. Speaker. I think I'll end my contribution to the SPS by highlighting to the Honorable Premier and his administration that this year marks the 100th year for the Georgetown Town Hall and its memory. And Mr. Speaker, I was expecting to hear some intended event or notification or celebration of the long history of what the Georgetown Town Hall has done for this country, and particularly Georgetown as a district. And I asked and encouraged the government to consider, for all the memories and usefulnesses that the Georgetown Town Hall has given to all the people Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the administration will always find ways to celebrate our history in some way, shape, or form. That being said, Mr. Speaker, I want to offer this government, if there's any way that my skill set or my community or my constituency can help to continue to improve the Cayman Islands for the future, because we're all in this together, regardless of criticisms, it's mainly because we all have different views on the best ways for success. And if there's anything that I can do to help the administration find better solutions for the people of the Cayman Islands, I'm at their mercy, Mr. Speaker. And I look forward to the budget, and I'm welcoming to give support to the necessary funding for these policies that have been laid out in the strategic policy statement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll call on the member from Georgetown West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I promise you won't have to ask me to wrap up. I rise to congratulate the Premier on a well-presented and delivered detailed SPS. I am proud to be part of this unity government, and I will continue to play my role in supporting the government in achieving its objectives. And I thank you very much for that.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll call on the Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I just wish to thank those members who have spoken for their kind remarks and for the observations they have made with respect to the government's proposals. And I wish to thank those who haven't spoken for their tacit support.
Honorable members, we have been through a short meeting, but a grueling meeting, very important meeting of this Honorable House. And I want to say to you that no matter what is said, the togetherness, the unity, the good behavior that I saw in this meeting had been, I haven't seen it in my 36 years, except for the first meeting after I won. And I am proud of the House and the way that you have conducted yourselves. I am reminded of one of my favorite hymns. It says, "Courage, brother, do not stumble. There's a star to guide the humble." And it goes on to say, "Perish policy and cunning, perish all that fears the light. Whether losing, whether winning, trust in God and do the right. Some will hate thee, some will love thee, some will flatter, some will slight. Cease from man and look above thee, trust in God and do the right. Simple rule and safest guiding, inward peace and inward might. Star upon our path abiding, trust in God and do the right." But my favorite one, and it has much to do with the SPS, it's a favorite chorus, a Jamaican chorus. It says, "Things already better. Things already better. For the Lord our God is on our side. Better. Things already better. Things already better." I should have sung it, but I will leave the Premier to perhaps learn it someday. And so, the question is, be it now therefore resolved that the Legislative Assembly approves the policy priorities, aggregate financial targets, and financial allocations set out in the 2020-2022 Strategic Policy Statement as the indicative parameters on which the 2020 and 2021 budgets will be formulated. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment motion Number 3 has been passed in majority.
Mr. Speaker, before the adjournment on a matter of procedure, I'd just like to move that the private members' motions that have not been dealt with be put down for the next meeting.
Member from Georgetown Central.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The motion is that the business remaining be carried over to the next meeting. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, the ayes have it. The remaining business will be carried over to the next meeting of this Honorable House as set down by the government. Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I could indicate to members that the plan is, at this stage, for the next meeting of the House to be early June. Emergencies and exigencies accepted. And so, Mr. Speaker, with that, I move the adjournment of this Honorable House sine die.
Question is that this Honorable House do not adjourn sine die. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, the House stands adjourned sine die.